All right, hi. Today is Tuesday, December the 19th, and I think this is the fifth Zoom that we've done so far today, talking about what happened and what didn't happen yesterday at the UK parliamentary debate. And so the floor is wide open. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share your opinion or ask a question or whatever you would like to talk about. The floor is all yours.
So I was actually there
Oh,
in
wow.
in at the debate.
Oh, I'll have to look at the
So it
photograph
was
and
it was
see if I can pick you out.
um, so the thing is with the debate, it was a debate based on a petition. So it wasn't in the actual chamber; it was in Westminster Hall, which is one of the side halls where they basically kind of debate a petition.
Mhm.
Um, the kind of number of people was actually the number of members of parliament there was actually very low. And the members of parliament that were there were mainly conservative, so the government members of parliament, and they were all kind of very much against signing up to these international health regulation amendments. There was one from a person from the opposition, which was the shadow health minister,
Mhm.
who basically thought everything was going to be hunky dory and really liked the fact that the World Health Organization was going to be in charge for whenever we're going to get the next pandemic. So um, I suppose, in a way, the thing that worried me about it personally was actually, although the government minister gave us absolute guarantees that the UK government wouldn't sign up to anything that would take the decisions away from the UK, so they would not sign up to giving the WHO the power to kind of decide what was going to be done in the case of a pandemic for the UK citizens anyway. It was very odd that he didn't want to. He was telling us that amendments were being negotiated at the moment, that there were civil servants who were kind of negotiating these amendments under his supervision, if you like, or under his guidance. But he wasn't telling us which civil servants they were, and it also wasn't telling us which amendments they were specifically negotiating. And he always made it sound like it was some sort of secretive negotiation, that it was all very sensitive and therefore couldn't be out in the open. I've been talking to people since, and we're all quite worried that actually this doesn't mean very much for in terms of giving us confidence that that the WHO power grab is not going to go ahead also for the UK, because we've been in a similar situation within the EU when actually there were government guarantees that they were not going to sign away any power to the EU, but actually that was subsequently just ignored. So I personally and quite a few people are still very worried that the debate yesterday did not. I mean, it was clear that some people kind of are waking up to the fact that all these things are not good, the amendments nor the pandemic treaty, but whether it's sufficient, I doubt very much at this stage. And my feeling is also that within the UK, there are just not a lot of people that are aware of this happening. So that's my take on it.
I have much to say, but let me keep the floor open. If anyone else would like to comment or ask a question, that's the purpose of me having these meetings. Um, Anyone else?
Which could I just ask, James,
Sure.
which countries are represented here apart from the UK? Is there another?
Well, I'm from California. I'm from the United States. So if
Sure,
anybody else
sure.
wants to say where they're from, if you want to, that'd be great. Please feel free.
I'm in the UK. I'm find it all very depressing. I'm getting to the stage where it's just like we need just to get rid of Parliament. It doesn't represent anyone. It's just the frustration of it all. And I have huge respect for what you're doing, James. I think it's amazing that the evidence you've presented to so many people.
Yeah.
It's a time game, isn't it, really, to get the awareness there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Um, Magda, I forget where you're from.
I'm from the north of England, yeah.
Okay. And Mickey and Jack, if you care to say where you're from. Okay, that's all good.
Oh, he's muted. Jack is muted.
Jack is muted. Anyways, I've been speaking with people all over the world, and the issue is really not just about the UK. It's really
Sure.
Uh, universal. And um, uh, even if you were at the event yesterday, the issue that I have been raising is what I'm concerned about going forward from here is that
Right.
people, a certain segment of the population are going to pay attention to this debate. They're going to take clips of it and they're going to share what this, that, and the other person said. But it was supposed to be a 3-hour debate and it only went for 2. And there was at least an hour of information that did not get said. And I've been reporting on this for months. And it's the issues that were not discussed that I'm concerned are going to be hidden under the rug even more so. What was actually talked about was speculation about what might be coming in the future. And I feel that they missed an extremely big opportunity to talk about the fraud and the administrative malfeasance and the conspiracy to violate the international health regulations that have already happened and are documented. Now, if what I just said doesn't resonate with you and you're not aware of that, that's exactly the problem. Okay. They didn't even bother to read the petition. The whole purpose of the discussion was a citizen's petition to have a vote.
Chris, would you like a piece of tape?
I'm going to mute everybody out here for a moment. The purpose of the petition was to have a discussion and a vote in Parliament on amendments that were purportedly, it comes to be known that they never were properly voted on, but amendments were purported to be adopted in May of 2022, and Parliament never considered them, never voted on them, and that's what this petition was about. And it was started by Testori on April 3rd, ran to October 3rd, and they didn't schedule this discussion, certainly not a full Parliament discussion, until 18 days after the 18-month deadline where any nation could reject them. Not a single member of Parliament in the room even bothered to mention the purpose of the petition. It's the executive branch of the government's obligation to present whatever agreements they may have entered into to the Parliament for 21 days, according to a 2010 statute, so that they can be discussed, be debated, and they're not asking for approval or consent or ratification, but the option is supposed to be given to vote to reject any amendments. Well, they never bothered to do that. And Kat Smith, who was the person representing the petition committee, said very clearly, and I extracted the clip, it's on the in the article where you got this Zoom link, she said very clearly they have no plans to have an election or a vote. They're telling you very clearly that the executive branch of government is going to make these decisions and Parliament will be told to enact implementing legislation. Now, that distinction is something that clouds everybody's minds and they hear what's being said inaccurately. What they're not saying is what's very clear in other nations like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. In their law, it's very clear that the decision to accept any such agreement or amendments rests solely in the executive branch of government. And in those nations, Parliament has zero to say about it. And people can't handle that. It blows their mind that their executive branch of government, prime minister, foreign minister, health minister, whatever, they can enter into an international agreement, and there is nothing that their parliament can say about it. That's just how it's structured in those nations. They have in their history reports saying, oh, couldn't we please have the little bit of control that the UK has? Because in the UK, the government is supposed to present any changes or new agreements to Parliament. It's supposed to sit in Parliament for 21 days, and they have the option to vote to reject it. That was never done. And I don't think any member of Parliament that was there even had a clue that that administrative malfeasance had happened, even though it's been reported and I've shared it with them directly. Parliament was supposed to have been given the opportunity to have a full-fledged parliamentary discussion on the amendments that were adopted in 2022, and the executive branch of the government just conveniently never bothered to present the information to them. That's administrative malfeasance. That's a breakdown of government function. One branch of government violating the rights of the other branch of government. And nobody even spoke a word about it. And so talking about what was discussed, which is talking about what might be in the next round of amendments, is a decoy that everybody fell for.
Have you spoken to Tess as to what she felt after the debate?
Only brief text messages back and forth. And so I think people lost sight of the plot. Okay.
The problem is you're sitting there as the public, and you're not allowed to say anything. So
Right.
you might have extremely intelligent questions, but you just have to bite your tongue. So it's not very, from that point of view, it's not very open, obviously.
Obviously. And so the issue is, it seems like everybody forgot why they were there. There was a petition from 116,000 people well in advance of the deadline saying Parliament is supposed to debate this and vote on it. And so the petition committee dragged their feet. They scheduled that well after the deadline. But more importantly, nobody mentioned that. Nobody mentioned, hey, wait a minute. Amendments did go through. You have a real life example. The World Health Assembly fraudulently submitted amendments on May 24th, fraudulently pretended to vote in committee on May 27th, 2022, and fraudulently created a document saying that they had to vote on May 28th, and it didn't happen. And nobody said a word about that. And a dozen members of the European Parliament back on November 28th sent a letter to Tedros saying, we want to see evidence that you actually voted on these amendments. So, the sum total of it is actually good news. What they did last year was done fraudulently. And those 12 members of the European Parliament said to the WHO, if you don't give us evidence that you actually voted, then what you were purporting to have had, done, adopting, it's null and void. So what should have happened yesterday is a declaration that the WHO committed fraud and that these amendments that the people wanted to have discussed are null and void. And that didn't happen.
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying that they should have voted within the WHO or within the UK Parliament? I'm getting a bit confused. Sorry, you're muted.
And I apologize for the confusion because this is how they get you. What was supposed to happen yesterday was an open discussion about the amendments that were purportedly adopted in 2022. And that got glossed over, and they started talking about speculation about what may or may not happen in the future. And so in 2022, in May, at the World Health Assembly, amendments were illegitimately submitted, improperly sort of voted on in committee, and purported to have been voted on by the full assembly, which did not happen. That's all documented. The members of the European Parliament wrote a letter to Tedros saying, do you have evidence that you actually voted on these amendments? And those amendments were to shorten the time frame to consider the next round of amendments. That was the purpose of the petition. That was the purpose of the discussion. And they talked about everything else under the sun, except the reason why they were there. And so what's going to be happening now is a regurgitation of the decoy. They had a 2-hour conversation that avoided fraud, administrative malfeasance, and quite frankly, a conspiracy to violate Article 55 about the deadline to provide a final copy 4 months in advance of the next assembly. No mention of any of that. So that was a 2-hour-long decoy that everybody is falling for.
So, okay. So if we get them to, so what would be, if they had talked about it yesterday and they had recognized that there was a problem with the acceptance of the amendments in 2022, what would be the next step for the UK Parliament, or what should they do? Is reject them outright?
There should be an awareness that the WHO is committing fraud. There should be an awareness that the UK government is committing administrative malfeasance by not presenting amendments, international agreements from one branch of the government to the other and give Parliament 21 days to have a full-on discussion. There should be an awareness that the Petition Committee dragged their feet long enough to make it all irrelevant. There should
so
be
you're saying, so first of all, the UK Parliament should have been made aware that the WH amendments were not properly voted on in May. And then secondly, they should have been aware that these amendments should have been brought to UK Parliament for 21 days and that for, to be voted on, I suppose.
To be debated and discussed and potentially voted. They're not asked to vote to confirm or ratify, but they should be given the opportunity to vote to reject them.
To reject them. And that should have happened before the 1st of December.
Correct.
Yeah. So there are 2 aspects to this, right?
Well, there's more. The petition committee dragged their feet on the whole thing and scheduled this debate long after the deadline. And then going forward with, there's an additional something with all that I just said, in that way back on May 24th, 2022, the United Kingdom was one of the signatories that submitted those amendments. So there was never any discussion about, well, wait a minute, those were submitted in the middle of the assembly that really it should have been submitted 4 months in advance. And so the whole thing, the UK's government was involved from the beginning with that. They knew about it. There's been a changing cast of characters because at the time, back in 2022, Liz Truss was the foreign minister, but then she became prime minister and James Cleverly became the foreign minister, and now David Cameron is. And so that musical chairs and whoever was in the bureaucracy of the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office never bothered to obey their legal obligation to present those changes to the parliament. And so if you go back to 1969, nobody ever voted on the international health regulations. If you go to 2005, nobody ever voted on the international health regulations. If you go to 2022, nobody ever. What makes you think when Cat Smith said, we have no intention of having a vote? What the heck is going on here? This is the awareness that people around the world need, that your executive branch of government already is operating a global health dictatorship. The executives in each of our governments are not listening to the will of the people. They're doing whatever the heck they want to do, listening to whomever they may be listening to. It's not about the WHO trying to take over the world. There's an aspect of that. It's that they've created a council of heads of state all the way back in 1969, where the head of state sends a delegate to the World Health Assembly. They make decisions and nobody asks the people. That global governance is already in place. It's been in place for 54 years. They've evidenced, or there is evidence, that they've made changes in 2005 and 2022, and they don't bother to ask the people. We don't have a say. And so
where do we go from here?
Step number one is always awareness. Make this be quiet. Okay. Step number one is always awareness. Okay. No one of us is going to change, what's going on here. It's becoming clear on what actually just went down yesterday. What was not said? What kind of a decoy in your mind was put into your thoughts to focus on something when something else maybe should have been focused on? This is how they get you. They talk about this, they talk about that. It makes it sound like they're doing all this wonderful stuff, but look at the things that they did not discuss. That's the hard part, is to read a document and see what's missing, or to watch a discussion and hear what is not said. And so step number one is become aware and share that awareness with as many people as you can.
I think it's fantastic how you've managed to itemize all those things in this email that you've sent us. And again, I'll echo the great appreciation of all you've been doing. I think there are two things I'd like to say very quickly. There was a brilliant guy whose name I've forgotten, who's a doctor, who's talking about the jab effects of mental immunity and how people's memories even can be affected by some of the ingredients of the now famous jab. I do feel that the whole of the UK is in a state of torpor for whatever reason. It can be just an emotional effect of the whole COVID years and everything. It's really hard to even say more than 3 sentences to someone without them glazing over and wondering why you're bothering. There's a really strange sense of, I can't cope with this. Don't give it to me. There's that, but also, with all the respect I have for you sort of talking about Parliament and what isn't being said. I mean, apparently mainstream media today didn't even report there had been a debate. When you think of the enormity of it, that's fairly amazing in itself. Because we know that our media is so stitched up now, we don't get to know half of the things that are going on. But given, as you are suggesting, that Parliament is not governing us or representing us, then, in a way, paying attention to what they're doing has almost become, do you seriously still believe that we can affect change by playing the game of expecting Parliament to do as they always have been. I mean, this is the process of great reset. This is a total power grab. And I wonder whether it's actually the way to do it. Because I expect you're very aware of common law, but it just seems to me that you absolutely refute the system through common law.
I've been having meetings ongoing in regards to that aspect. Magna, reach out to me. That's a separate conversation that I'm overjoyed to have with somebody who's interested in that. To do something that I don't like, but I'm going to do it because it'll maybe get the point across. But I hate it when people do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. The way to answer one of the statements you made is, people said, oh, slavery will never come to an end. Apartheid will never come to an end. The Berlin Wall will never fall. Men will never run a 4-minute mile. Okay. Anytime somebody says, oh, there's nothing you can do, I go, well, I didn't say it was going to be easy. Okay. But it starts with one person and then another. And then, it's the truth. All I'm doing is speaking the truth. And so, yeah, I get it. It's overwhelming. It seems impossible. People don't want to listen. But it starts with one person comprehending the truth. If I'm ever wrong about something and somebody tells me what the truth is, by all means. Chris, I think you want to say something. Please do.
Yeah, I think just to come back on Foster's points and indeed Magda's points, we are being railroaded. There seems to be no recognition whatsoever of the mood of a very, very substantial proportion of the thinking public who have put time into this. And yes, awareness is very important, but then there is a question of action. And the matter is, what action is there available? There are possible lawsuits that one can bring against malfeasance in public office. Whether we could find a law company that will be willing to take such a thing up, I do not know. I'm sure it could be easily funded on a public basis. And I take also Magna's point. I've read a couple of scientific papers on the potential mind-altering effects of some batches of these injections. Not all the batches are the same. And of course, most people think, just like any other medicine, that they are the same. So most people won't have had a particularly bad effect, and they'll be thinking, oh, well, I don't know what everybody's complaining about, or this small minority is complaining about, because I'm all right. But they may not be all right with the next batch of injections to combat the next pandemic, So I come back to Foster's question. What is the action that can be taken? There are plenty of people who are aware, but one feels there's very little action. And I've been looking around for lawyers, constitutional lawyers who might be willing to take this up. Nobody seems willing to do very much, apart from Andrew Bridgen and a couple of a small number of MPs, And getting in touch with Andrew is quite difficult. I've met him on a couple of occasions, and it's a relatively small band of activists, albeit a fairly large number of people who are aware of what's going on and seem not able to do very much about it.
In terms, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, that's the feeling you get, that there's not a big enough, but there are lots of different smaller movements, grassroots movements going on. Dissent, don't comply, stand in the park, UK call. I mean, I come across so many different ones, and I heard is it Mick Stott of the 300 Guardians talking about how it was really like guerrilla warfare, and not to get downhearted that we don't have a single movement that can fight against this, but if there's lots of broad spread out actions from all angles, it's like gradually getting people to realise our governments are totally corrupt. You can't go to your MPs to say anything on your behalf because they're all, compromised in some way, I think.
Seems to be.
Yeah. I'll weigh in. There's only 8 minutes left, and so I want to give everybody a chance. If there's anything else anybody wants to say, please do. The floor is open. Any questions?
Well, the only thing I just wanted to, because actually I've been in my own little way campaigning on this by kind of providing written evidence and video evidence to the WHO regarding these amendments over the past year and a half. And I suppose my worry has always been that I have felt from day one that these lockdowns were a complete disaster. And the main reason for actually still being active is actually that I want to prevent them from ever happening again. And so my main worry with the WHO pandemic plan and the amendments as they stand is a question that actually you will have a completely unelected body that actually can then potentially make decisions over public health in different countries. So that's been my main worry. Am I right with that, James, or should I say, well, actually, the World Health Organization can say whatever they want, but you can still go ahead and live your own life as you want?
Well, let me make you think about that on a different level. Okay, you already have an unelected band of bureaucrats in your own nation who are making health decisions for you. That is the problem that everybody is missing. Okay, they're focusing on the WHO and these proposed amendments and a proposed agreement. Those proposed agreements are primarily a business venture. If you actually really get into the details of what's going on, what they're trying to do is funnel money to build out the capability and the capacity around the world to manufacture more pandemic-related products.
Yep.
It's not what the vast majority of people have been presenting this as. It's not really what was discussed yesterday. Yes, that's an aspect of it. What they're really talking about doing is seeking out around the world to identify new pathogens that have pandemic potential so they can bring them into the laboratory to make more drugs and jabs. Well, arguably, that's what caused this problem.
Yes.
I agree
Okay.
with you, but if there's not an international body that tells us that we, that kind of instigate health passports and vaccine passports and, can instigate, can call out pandemics, that then everybody has to obey certain rules as they see fit. And I suppose that's been, it's at so many different levels that they can influence, if this all goes ahead, that they have actually, in my opinion, just reading it all, is that they will get more power. And as they are unelected and as they are funded by a lot of commercial entities and people with ulterior motives rather than my health, I suppose in a way I worry about that.
Well, let me try to clarify something that almost everybody seems to be missing. Okay. Now, primarily, this discussion yesterday was supposed to be about the amendments, 2 different batches. They blended in discussion of what is now being called the pandemic agreement. And when Tedros says something like, oh, the pandemic agreement will not give more power to the WHO, he's speaking the truth, but it's a partial truth that it seems no one has really talked about. They know how to choose their words, so they speak something that is precise and accurate, but they know that people are not going to hear it properly. What the new agreement would set up is not a transfer of power to the WHO or to the Director General. He's absolutely correct about that. Almost everybody on our side is misrepresenting that agreement. That agreement would set up a whole new bureaucracy called the Conference of the Parties, much like the Conference of the Parties that was created in 1992 with the Framework Convention on Climate Change. They just got done having a couple of weeks worth of meetings. That agreement would set up a new bureaucracy that would be given authority to meet every year and tell all of the nations what they have decided that all of the nations would have signed a blank agreement to abide by in the same manner that they did in 1992 with the Framework Convention for Climate Change. So everybody's missing the target by a little bit. The agreement will not give more sovereignty to the WHO. It would create a whole new bureaucracy. And this is how they get to speak to people and say things that are true, but they're not complete truth. Now, if Tedros would say, oh, you guys got it all wrong, that's not going to give me more power. That's going to set up a whole new bureaucracy and give all power to it. He doesn't say that. Okay.
So you're saying that the power will lie with a bureaucratic organization rather than with the WHO, will lie with a bureaucratic system that they will create. So it is, to a certain extent, it's semantics though, isn't it?
Well, it's how people tell partial truths and get away with it, because the people who are on our side are not clear in what they're saying. They mix up the treaty and the amendments and last year's amendments and next year's amendments, and they get it all jumbled up in their head. And so they're able to be confused by somebody who knows what's going on. Now, you have to guess that Tedros knows what the status of the current negotiations are. And it's been negotiated for almost a year now, and people are still talking about the language from a year ago. And the people at the WHO are laughing at them. They know that they're having difficulty with the negotiations, but the things that people are speculating about, because there's no way to know, it's ridiculous. They're speculating.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, because I can see that we're nearly at an end. Mm-hmm. Would you be very kind? I perhaps could find this out for myself, but I think that in terms of taking action, because I think that's all what we all desperately want to do mm-hmm. as some kind of cathartic thing, is we could write to our doctors, say, do you know this, and put some of these points. We can write to our MPs, although mine never answers nowadays. We could write to more members of parliament. We could also write to the WHO, and we can spread it out to people. So if you've got any useful contacts of how to approach people in the WHO or any relevant person there, I'd really appreciate that.
Those things are all possibilities and should be done, but it's far more important to share that information with other regular people, to build allies, so that when you do go and talk to members of parliament and such, it's not just you against the world. And so This is almost over. I'll be back at the top of the hour. Be happy to, you can always reach out to me directly, be happy to help out.
Thank you.